"Can I eat with you?" asked a hungry orc. The human's reaction surprised her. The scorched wastes didn't care what color you bled. Green, red, or something in between. The desert would take it all the same. That's what Sheka kept telling herself as she dragged one foot in front of the other, leaving a trail through sand that looked like someone had tried to walk and failed halfway through the attempt. 3 days without water does things to you. 4 days without food does worse things. 5 days. 5 days is when you start having conversations with rocks, because at least rocks don't judge you for the choices that got you here. And Sheka had made some choices. The kind of choices that get you exiled from your clan. The kind that make your own people look at you like you're something that needs to be scraped off their boots. The kind that leave you stumbling through a desert with nothing but the clothes on your back, a broken spear you're too weak to carry anymore, and a small red stone in your pocket that weighs more than it should. She'd been a warrior once. Good one too. Could split a training dummy in half with one swing. Could drink 3 orcs under the table and still be standing for the morning drills. Could make Chieftain Ulya laugh, which was harder than winning most battles. Past tense, all of it past tense now. The sun was doing that thing where it pretends it's going to set but really just hangs there, baking everything a little longer for good measure. Sheka's green skin had gone a shade darker, the kind of dark that happens when you're one bad decision away from becoming part of the landscape. That's when she smelled it. Smoke, not the forest fire kind, the cooking kind, the someone is making food and you're not invited kind. Her stomach made a noise that would have embarrassed her if she had any dignity left to lose. She didn't. Dignity had packed its bags around day 3. The campfire came into view like a mirage, except mirages don't usually include a human in leather armor rotating meat over flames. Real meat, the kind that sizzles and drips fat that makes the fire pop and hiss. Sheka stopped, 50 feet away, far enough that she wasn't a threat, close enough that he definitely knew she was there. The human didn't look up, just kept turning the spit with the kind of focus people use when they're pretending not to notice something. He had the build of someone who'd spent years carrying things that were too heavy and fighting people who were too angry. Dark hair, beard that had started going grey at the edges, scars on his hands that caught the firelight. This was the part where things usually went one of 2 ways. He'd either reach for his sword or he'd reach for his sword. There wasn't really a third option when an orc showed up at your campfire in the middle of nowhere. Sheka's hand moved to where her spear should have been. Found empty air. Right. She'd left that 2 miles back when her arms decided they were done with the whole carrying things concept. The human finally looked up. His eyes did that thing human eyes do when they spot an orc, that little flicker of calculation. Threat assessment. How fast can I get to my weapon? How hard will I need to swing? Standard stuff. But he didn't reach for his sword. He just looked at her, really looked at the way she was swaying on her feet. At the dust covering her like a second skin, at how her armor hung loose because she'd lost weight in places she didn't know she could lose weight. "Can I eat with you?" The words came out before Sheka's brain approved them. Her voice sounded like someone had dragged it across gravel and left it in the sun too long. 5 seconds of silence, long enough to wonder if he'd heard her, long enough to wonder if she'd actually spoken or just thought she had. Long enough for her pride to catch up and start screaming at her for begging. The human looked at the meat, looked at her, looked at the meat again, like it might have an opinion on the matter. "You gonna kill me after?" His voice had the flat tone of someone asking about the weather. "No. You gonna steal my horse? Don't think I could catch it. You gonna try?" "No." Another 5 seconds. The meat kept sizzling. The fire kept crackling. Somewhere in the distance, a nightbird made a sound that was probably supposed to be romantic, but came out vaguely threatening. "Sit." 1 word. That's all it took. Sheka's legs folded under her before her brain finished processing the permission. She hit the sand hard enough to send up a small cloud of dust. 50 feet felt like 50 miles. She crawled the first 10, walked the next 30, and collapsed the final 10. Up close, the human looked more tired than threatening. The kind of tired that lives in your bones and sends out change of address cards because it's planning to stay a while. He had a water skin next to him, leather saddlebags, a bedroll that looked like it had seen things, a sword that was practical rather than pretty, the kind you actually use instead of just polish. He pulled the meat off the fire, set it on a flat rock to rest, and slid his knife out with the kind of casual movement that said he could put it through your eye before you finished blinking, but probably wouldn't unless you gave him a reason. Sheka watched him cut the meat into portions, watched him put the bigger piece on a second flat rock, watched him slide that rock toward her with his boot. Eat slow. You throw it up, that's on you. She wanted to say thank you, wanted to explain, wanted to tell him that orcs weren't supposed to beg, weren't supposed to show weakness, weren't supposed to sit at human campfires eating charity like it was a feast. Instead, she picked up the meat and took a bite. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted. Not because it was particularly well seasoned, the human had basically just cooked it until it stopped being raw, but because it wasn't sand, wasn't nothing, wasn't the taste of your own failure. They ate in silence, the kind of silence that happens when two people who should be enemies are too tired to be enemies and too hungry to care. The fire popped, the meat disappeared. The night settled in like it had been waiting for an invitation. Water. The human tossed his water skin across the fire. It hit the sand next to Sheka with a soft thud. She picked it up. Leather worn smooth, still warm from where he'd been carrying it. She could smell it. Water that wasn't imaginary, wasn't 3 days ago, wasn't a cruel trick her brain was playing. Go easy. His voice had a warning in it. You drink too fast, too late. Sheka had already taken 3 long pulls before her stomach reminded her that it had opinions about this. She stopped, handed the water skin back, waited for the nausea to decide if it was going to make an appearance. It thought about it, decided against it. Sheka counted that as a win. Got a name? The human was cleaning his knife on his pant leg, not looking at her, just asking like he was asking about anything. Sheka. Oswin. Thanks for the... She gestured at the empty rock where her food had been. For not killing me. Day's not over yet. It should have sounded like a threat. It didn't. It sounded like a joke. The kind of joke you make when you're so far past caring that you've reached a kind of zen acceptance of how weird life gets. Sheka pulled the red stone from her pocket. Jasper with gold veins, polished smooth by hands that weren't hers. It caught the firelight and held it like it was valuable. I can pay. Oswin glanced at the stone, glanced away. Keep it. It's the only thing I said keep it. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks up into the darkness. You'll need something to remember where you came from when you find where you're going. The thing about humans, Sheka thought, is that they're supposed to be predictable. They see orc, they think monster. They see green skin and tusks. They reach for weapons. They don't share food. They definitely don't refuse payment. But Oswin was doing all of that. Why? The question came out smaller than she meant it to. Oswin took his time answering, fed another piece of wood to the fire, watched it catch. You asked. Most people who want to kill me don't ask first. Maybe I'm smart. Lull you into... You're not lulling anyone into anything. You can barely sit up straight. He glanced at her, and for the first time, something almost like humor touched his expression. Besides, I've fought orcs. You're not moving like someone who's planning an ambush. You're moving like someone who's had a really bad week. Try bad month. Want to talk about it? No. Good. Neither do I. They sat there as the fire burned lower. The desert cold started creeping in, the kind that makes you understand why people invented blankets. Sheka's empty stomach felt better than her full one had 5 minutes ago, which was probably a sign that her body had forgotten how eating worked. You got somewhere to go? Oswin asked after a while. Not really. Running from something? More like exiled from something. He nodded like that made perfect sense. Know the feeling. Humans exile people? We're creative. We call it dishonorable discharge. He smiled, but it wasn't the happy kind. It means they kick you out and take your pension and tell everyone you're not fit to wear the uniform anymore. What did you do? Refused an order. Bad order? The kind where you're supposed to kill people who surrendered. Sheka looked at him properly for the first time, really looked, at the way his hands didn't shake, at the calm in his eyes that came from making peace with choices that cost everything, at the quiet that surrounded him like armor. "So you're homeless too," she said. "Prefer independently wandering. That's just homeless with extra words. Sounds better, though." A laugh bubbled up from somewhere in Sheka's chest. Small one. Barely there, but real. First time in weeks. It felt strange, like a muscle she'd forgotten how to use. Oswin pulled his bedroll closer to the fire, settled into it with the groan of someone whose back had opinions about sleeping on the ground. "I'm going to sleep. You try anything, I'll wake up. I wake up, you won't like what happens next. Understood. You can stay till morning. After that," he shrugged. "After that, I don't care. Go wherever you're going." Sheka wanted to say something meaningful, something that captured the weight of what was happening. An orc and a human sharing a fire like it was normal, like the world hadn't spent centuries teaching them to hate each other on sight. Instead, she just said, "Thank you." Oswin didn't answer, might have already been asleep, might have been pretending. Either way, the conversation was over. Sheka lay down on the other side of the fire. The sand was hard and cold and uncomfortable. It felt like heaven compared to the last 5 nights. She put her hand in her pocket, felt the smooth surface of the red stone. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "This stone is older than our clan, Sheka. Older than the feuds we fight and the wars we win. Hold it when you're lost. It'll remind you that blood doesn't wash away, even when everything else does." She'd been 7 when he said that, had thought he was talking about family blood, clan blood, the literal blood that made her orc. Now, lying in the dirt across from a human who'd shared food when he didn't have to, she wondered if maybe her father had meant something else, something bigger, something about the kind of blood that doesn't come from what you're born as, but from what you choose to become. The fire crackled. The stars wheeled overhead like they were in a hurry to get somewhere. And for the first time in 5 days, Sheka slept without dreaming about dying. Morning came with all the subtlety of a war drum in your ear. Sheka woke to Oswin already moving around the camp, packing his gear with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The fire was out, the sun was up. The desert looked exactly as hostile as it had yesterday. Her body felt like it had been used as a training dummy, and then apologized to the dummy for the comparison. Every muscle had a complaint. Her mouth tasted like something had died in it, and sent invitations to the funeral. "Morning." Oswin tossed something toward her, a piece of dried meat wrapped in cloth. "Last of my rations. Take it." Sheka caught it more through reflex than skill. "You don't have to—" "I know." He was checking his saddle, making sure everything was secure. His horse, a grey mare with the patient expression of someone who'd seen some things, stood waiting like she'd been through this routine before. "But I'm headed to Cross Point, town about a day's ride west. They've got food, work, and enough trouble that they don't ask too many questions about who you are or where you came from. You're on foot, so maybe 3 days if you don't pass out." "Why are you helping me?" Oswin stopped what he was doing, turned to look at her properly. "Because someone helped me once, when I was stumbling through my own desert, metaphorically speaking, and I remember what it felt like to think nobody gave a damn if I lived or died." He adjusted his sword belt. "Turns out one person caring makes all the difference." He swung up into the saddle with the easy grace of someone who'd been riding since before walking was cool. 3 days west. Follow the rock formations that look like teeth. Can't miss them. You'll hit the road, follow it north, you'll see Cross Point. What if they don't want an orc in their town? Then you'll deal with it. Same as I deal with towns that don't want disgraced soldiers." He gathered the reins. "World's full of places that don't want you. Trick is finding the ones that don't care enough to stop you." He started to ride off, then paused, reached into his saddlebag and pulled out another water skin, smaller, older, patched in 3 places. He tossed it down. It landed in the sand with a soft splash. "Cross Point is 3 days away. That's 2 days of water if you're smart about it." His eyes met hers. "Be smart about it." Then he was gone. Just gone. riding west like he hadn't just saved someone who was supposed to be his enemy, like it was normal, like it didn't matter. Sheka stood there holding the water skin and the food, watching the dust settle where his horse had been, thinking about everything she'd been taught. Orcs are warriors. Orcs don't beg. Orcs don't accept charity from humans. Orcs don't sit at campfires with their supposed enemies and talk about exile like it's just another Tuesday. But also, Sheka was alive, was fed, had water, had a direction. She slipped the red stone from her pocket, held it up to the morning light. The gold veins glinted like they knew something she didn't. You'll need something to remember where you came from when you find where you're going. West, toward something called Cross Point, toward a town that might not want her but might not care enough to stop her, toward whatever came next. Sheka started walking. Cross Point earned its name by being the place where 3 different trade routes gave up and collapsed into each other, creating a town that couldn't decide what it wanted to be when it grew up. Half military outpost, half trading hub, half something else that didn't add up but somehow worked anyway. Math was optional in Cross Point. Survival wasn't. Sheka arrived on the afternoon of day 4, which meant she'd either gotten lost for a day or Oswin's horse was faster than she'd thought. Probably both. The town had walls, low ones, the kind that said, "We're technically defended," without really committing to the bit. Guards stood at the gate with the enthusiasm of people working a job they didn't particularly enjoy, but needed the money. One was human. One was something else. Half-elf, maybe. Hard to tell from a distance when your eyes were still adjusting to the concept of civilization. Sheka approached slowly, hands visible, non-threatening posture. All the things you do when you're an orc, trying to enter a human town without starting an incident. The human guard looked up, looked down at a piece of paper he was holding, looked up again. Business? Looking for work. What kind of work does an orc do in Cross Point? The kind that pays. He almost smiled. Almost. Fair enough. You cause trouble, you leave. You steal, you leave. You hurt someone, you leave in pieces. Clear? Crystal. Gate fee is 2 coppers. Sheka's hand went to her pocket. The red stone was there. Nothing else. I don't have... Then you don't enter. This was it. The part where her luck ran out. The part where she explained that she'd walked 4 days through a desert to get here, and please, just this once, could someone cut her a break? I've got it. The voice came from behind the guards. Familiar. Unexpected. Oswin stepped into view from where he'd been leaning against the inside of the gate, looking like he'd been waiting, probably because he had been waiting. He flipped 2 coppers to the guard with the casual indifference of someone who knew the exact price of compassion. The guard caught them, examined them with the thoroughness of someone who'd been passed fake coins before, nodded. She's in. She's your problem now. Everything's my problem, Oswin said, already walking away. That's why I drink. Sheka followed him through the gate, past buildings that leaned into each other like drunk friends, past merchants shouting about their definitely authentic, not stolen goods, past the kind of crowd that comes from 3 trade routes colliding, and nobody bothering to clean up the mess. You waited, she said. Needed a drink anyway. Oswin stopped at a building with a sign that read, "The Crooked Mug," in letters that were, appropriately, crooked. Figured you'd show up eventually, or you wouldn't. Either way, I was having a drink. You didn't have to pay 2 coppers, not exactly bankrupting me. He pushed open the door. The smell of alcohol, cooking food, and poor life choices rolled out like a greeting. You want to pay me back? Buy me a drink when you get money. Until then, shut up and follow me. The inside of the Crooked Mug lived up to its name. Nothing was quite straight. Not the tables, not the bar, not the regulars who occupied both with the permanent attachment of barnacles on a ship hull. Oswin walked to a corner table like he owned it, probably because he'd been sitting there for the past day and a half, waiting. He flagged down a woman behind the bar, middle-aged, built like she'd been a soldier, and retired into running a tavern that doubled as a therapy session. Oswin, your friend finally showed up. She's not my friend, Mara. She's a stray I fed once, and she followed me home. Same thing. Mara approached with 2 mugs of something that might have been ale or might have been a threat. She set them down, gave Sheka a long look that calculated everything from threat level to life story, and grunted. "Orc. Notice that, did you?" Sheka said. "We get a few through here. Mostly traders. You don't look like a trader." "I'm not." "Good. Traders are annoying." Mara wiped her hands on her apron. "You cause problems?" "Try not to." "You any good at moving heavy things?" "Used to be." "Kitchen needs help. Lifting crates, hauling barrels, breaking up fights when the customers get stupid. Pays room and board plus 2 coppers a day. You interested?" Sheka looked at Oswin. He was deliberately not looking back, just staring at his drink like it had the secrets of the universe floating in it. "Yes," Sheka said. "I'm interested." "Good. Start now. Back room. Go." It wasn't a discussion. It was a deployment. Sheka stood, walked toward the back, stopped halfway, turned. "Oswin." He looked up, finally. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Mara. She's the one hiring you. You told her I'd be here." "Maybe. You paid the gate fee. 2 coppers. Barely counts. You waited a day and a half. I like the ale here." Sheka smiled. Small. Real. The kind that means more than words. "You're a terrible liar." "Yeah, well." Oswin took a drink. "Don't tell anyone. Ruins my reputation." 3 months. That's how long it took for Crosspoint to stop being a place Sheka was passing through and start being a place she was passing time in. Then eventually a place she just was. The work was hard. Moving crates that weighed more than most humans, breaking up fights between drunk merchants who thought they were warriors, hauling barrels of ale up from the cellar while Mara shouted instructions that were half orders, half life advice. "Put your back into it, girl. Don't let those idiots at table 7 start singing. Nothing good comes from drunk singing. If someone pulls a knife, you pull them out the door. We just cleaned the floor." But the work was also simple. Do the thing. Get paid. Sleep in an actual bed, in an actual room instead of sand. Eat food that didn't require hunting first. Exist without constantly wondering if today was the day you collapsed in the desert and became buzzard food. Oswin was around. Not always. He took jobs, guard duty, escort missions, the kind of work that needed someone who knew which end of a sword was dangerous and could be trusted not to rob the client. But he came back to the Crooked Mug most nights, sat at his corner table, drank his ale, occasionally said something that qualified as conversation. They developed a rhythm. Not friendship exactly. Something simpler. Something that didn't need a name. "You look tired," Oswin said one night. "I lifted 17 barrels today. 17. Sounds excessive. Merchant bought out our entire stock of summer ale. Apparently there's a festival coming." "There's always a festival coming." He pushed a plate of bread and cheese across the table. "Eat." "You're going to pass out." "I'm fine." "You're swaying while sitting down. Eat." She ate. They didn't talk, didn't need to. But peace has a way of attracting trouble. Like blood in water, like light in darkness, like an orc and a human getting comfortable with each other in a world that really, really didn't approve. The trouble arrived on a rainy Tuesday in the form of Captain Derek and 6 soldiers wearing the colours of the Northern Kingdoms. They walked into the Crooked Mug with the confidence of people who knew they had authority and weren't afraid to use it. Derek was the kind of officer who'd earned his rank through competence rather than connections. Mid-40s, grey at the temples, eyes that missed nothing. He carried his sword like it was an extension of his arm, and probably slept with it close enough to grab in a hurry. He scanned the room, found Oswin, walked over. "Oswin, Captain." Oswin didn't stand, didn't salute, didn't do any of the things a soldier was supposed to do when an officer approached. Just acknowledged him like you'd acknowledge weather. "Been hearing things about you." "People talk. It's boring here." Derek pulled out a chair, sat without asking. His soldiers spread out behind him in that way soldiers do, covering exits, watching corners, being professional about the whole "we might need to kill everyone here" possibility. "Heard you're living with an orc?" Every person in the tavern suddenly found their drink fascinating. The background noise didn't stop exactly, just decreased. Volume turned down, everyone listening without appearing to listen. "She works here," Oswin said. His voice was level, careful. So do I, technically. Mara lets me run a tab that'll probably outlive both of us. That's not what I mean. I know what you mean, Captain. Oswin set down his mug with the kind of precision that said he was thinking very carefully about his next words. And I don't care. Derek's hand went to his sword, not grabbing it, just resting there. The universal sign of, I could make this a problem if I wanted to. Sheka was in the back room, could hear every word through the kitchen door. Her hand went to the cleaver she'd been using to chop vegetables. Heavy, sharp, useful for more than just food prep. There are rules, Derek said. Orcs register when they enter Crosspoint. Orcs don't stay longer than a week. Orcs definitely don't take up permanent residence and start working for humans like they belong here. Funny, nobody mentioned those rules at the gate. The gate guard is new and lazy. Derek leaned back in his chair. I'm neither. Your orc friend registers by tomorrow morning, or she leaves. Those are the options. And if she doesn't want either option, then I make a third option. You won't like it. She definitely won't like it. The air in the room changed, went from uncomfortable to dangerous. The kind of dangerous that happens when everyone knows violence is possible and is deciding whether it's probable. The kitchen door swung open. Sheka walked out, cleaver still in hand, not threatening, just present, visible, green and tall and very obviously the topic of conversation. I'll register, she said. Derek looked at her properly for the first time. Took in the kitchen apron, the vegetable stains, the cleaver that was definitely sharp enough to be a problem. Smart orc. Smart enough to know when I'm outnumbered. Good. He stood. Tomorrow morning. Administrative building. Ask for Clark Davidson. He handles special cases. The way he said special cases made it clear what he thought about orcs in general and this situation in particular. The soldiers filed out. Derek paused at the door, looked back at Oswin. You're better than this, he said. Better than what? Treating people like they're people? Better than throwing away everything you were for? He gestured vaguely at Sheka. For whatever this is. What I was got me exiled, Captain. What I am now got me a place to sleep and people who don't care about my past. Oswin picked up his mug again. I'll take that trade. Derek left. The tavern exhaled. Collectively, like everyone had been holding their breath and just remembered how lungs worked. Mara walked over, slammed a bottle of something stronger than ale onto the table. That was stupid. Which part? Oswin asked. All of it. Him coming here, you antagonizing him, her walking out with a weapon. She poured 3 glasses. But mostly the part where you're both idiots who can't just keep your heads down. Sheka sat down at the table, put the cleaver aside, took a glass. I'll register tomorrow. And then what? Mara asked. You think that's the end of it? Registration is just the start. They'll want to know where you came from, why you're here, what you're doing. And when they don't like the answers, which they won't, they'll find reasons to make you leave. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. We'll deal with it, Oswin corrected. Sheka looked at him, really looked, at the stubborn set of his jaw, at the quiet determination in his eyes. At the man who'd shared food with a stranger in a desert and was now volunteering to fight a system for someone who wasn't even his friend. Except maybe she was. Maybe that's what had happened without either of them noticing. Maybe friendship was less about grand declarations and more about showing up, about waiting at gates, about paying small fees, about saying we instead of you. You don't have to, she said quietly. I know. This could get messy. Everything gets messy. That's life. Mara poured another round, raised her glass. To idiots who make terrible decisions and somehow survive anyway. They drank. Outside the rain kept falling. Inside the fire kept burning. And somewhere between the two, something fragile and impossible continued to exist despite every reason it shouldn't. Registration turned out to be exactly as pleasant as a root canal performed by a bear with no medical training. Clark Davidson was a thin man with the personality of wet parchment and the enthusiasm of someone who'd been doing this job for 30 years and still hadn't figured out why. He had Sheka fill out forms, answer questions, provide information she didn't have. Place of birth? North mountains. Which mountains? The jagged spine. That's 300 miles of mountains. Be specific. The part with the sharp rocks and aggressive wildlife. Davidson stared at her over his spectacles, the look that said his patience was a finite resource and she was wasting it. Clan affiliation? Had one. Don't anymore. Reason for exile? Sheka's jaw tightened. The words wanted to stay buried, wanted to remain in the past where they belonged. But the clerk was waiting. The quill was poised, and lies had a way of catching up to you. Refuse to kill prisoners, she said finally. Davidson's quill stopped moving. He looked up. Really looked. Prisoners. Human soldiers. After a border skirmish. We won. They surrendered. Chieftain Ulia wanted them executed as an example. Sheka's voice was flat, emotionless. The tone you use when you're describing something that still hurts too much to feel. I said no, said it went against the old codes, said we were warriors, not murderers. And I was given a choice. Kill them myself to prove my loyalty, or leave and never come back. She met his eyes. I left. Davidson wrote it down, slowly, carefully, like he was deciding how important this information was. Then he set down his quill, folded his hands, looked at Sheka like he was seeing her for the first time. You understand this makes you an exile, an outcast, someone without honor. Sheka's hand went to her pocket, touched the red stone. I understand. I was going to say, interesting. Davidson pulled out a stamp, pressed it to her paperwork with unnecessary force. There, you're registered, officially recognized as a non-hostile entity with provisional residency status, pending quarterly review. What does that mean? It means you can stay, for now. But if Captain Derrick or anyone else decides you're a problem, this paper won't protect you. He slid the document across the desk. Keep it with you, always, and try not to cause incidents. Sheka took the paper. It felt heavier than it should. One more thing, Davidson said as she turned to leave. What you did, refusing to kill prisoners, that was the right choice. Didn't feel right at the time, felt like losing everything. Best choices rarely feel good when you make them. Only later, when you realize you can still look at yourself in a mirror. 3 more months passed. Seasons changed. Crosspoint did its Crosspoint thing. Existed loudly, chaotically, and with complete disregard for anyone's opinion about how towns should function. Sheka kept working, kept lifting barrels and breaking up fights, and existing in a space that hadn't quite figured out what to do with her, but also hadn't kicked her out yet. Oswin kept taking jobs, kept coming back, kept occupying his corner table like it was a throne made of mediocre ale and bad decisions. They kept whatever they were doing. Sometimes they talked about small things, about nothing that mattered and everything that did. You ever miss it? Oswin asked one night. Your clan, your people. Every day, Sheka admitted. You? The military? No. But I miss having a purpose. Miss knowing what I was supposed to be doing with my life. You're doing something now. Drinking, existing, helping people, waiting at gates for exiled orcs. She smiled. That's something. It's not a purpose. Maybe it is. Maybe purpose isn't this big dramatic thing. Maybe it's just showing up, being there, making someone's terrible day slightly less terrible. Oswin considered this, drank his ale. That's depressingly reasonable. I contain multitudes. But peace, as previously established, had a time limit, and that limit was rapidly approaching. The second trouble arrived in the form of someone Sheka had hoped never to see again, Ulia. She walked into Crosspoint like she owned it, because in her mind, she owned everything. The chieftain of the Bloodstone clan didn't ask permission. She took, she commanded, she expected obedience, and received it or made examples of those who didn't provide it. She had 4 warriors with her, real ones. The kind who'd been fighting since they could walk and would die before dishonoring their clan. They walked into the Crooked Mug, and every human in the place suddenly remembered they had business elsewhere. Except Oswin. He stayed in his corner, hand on his sword, eyes calculating. Ulia's gaze swept the room, found Sheka, locked on. So, she said in Orcish, her voice carrying the weight of glaciers moving. "This is where you've been hiding." Sheka stood slowly, put down the crate she'd been carrying, faced the woman who'd exiled her. "I'm not hiding, chieftain. I'm living. Among humans." Ulya's lip curled, the kind of expression you reserve for particularly offensive garbage. "You've fallen far. Or risen. Depends on perspective." One of the warriors, Brutka, scarred and built like an angry mountain, took a step forward. "Chieftain, let me handle this insult." "No." Ulya raised a hand. Brutka stopped immediately. Discipline. That's what made her warriors dangerous. Not just strength, not just skill, but the absolute willingness to follow orders without question. "I didn't come here to fight. I came to deliver a message. I'm listening. The war is escalating. The northern kingdoms are pushing into Bloodstone territory. We need every warrior." Ulya's eyes bored into Sheka's, even disgraced ones. "I'm not a warrior anymore. You made sure of that. I gave you a choice. You chose wrong. I chose not to murder people who'd surrendered. How is that wrong? Because it was an order." Ulya's voice cracked like thunder, the kind of sound that makes small animals hide and sensible people reconsider their life choices. Because when your chieftain commands, you obey. Because individual conscience is a luxury we cannot afford when our people are dying. Silence. The entire tavern had gone quiet. Even the fire seemed to be crackling more softly, trying not to draw attention. "Your exile is lifted," Ulya continued. "Come back, fight for your people, prove that you still have honor, that you can still be Orc." Sheka's hand went to her pocket, touched the red stone, felt its familiar weight. Her father's voice echoed, "Blood doesn't wash away." "No," she said. Ulya's expression didn't change. If anything, it hardened. "You refuse your chieftain's direct order. I'm not your warrior anymore. You exiled me, remember?" Sheka's voice was steady, calmer than she felt. "I've built a life here. I have work. I have people. You have humans." Ulya spat the word like it was poisonous. "And one human in particular, I hear." Her gaze shifted to Oswin, who was still sitting calmly in his corner, hand never leaving his sword. "Is he why you won't return? This pet you've adopted? Leave him out of this." "Why? Because you care about him?" Ulya laughed. "The bitter kind. You've forgotten what you are, Sheka. You're Orc. We don't befriend humans. We don't share meals with them. We don't—" She gestured at the entire situation. "Whatever this is, maybe that's the problem," Sheka said quietly. "Maybe that's exactly what's wrong with our people. We're so busy hating everyone else that we've forgotten what we're actually fighting for." Brutka moved again, faster this time, hand going to her weapon. Oswin stood, chair scraping back, sword half-drawn. "Enough!" Ulya's command froze everyone in place. "We will not fight here. Not today." She looked at Sheka one last time. "You have until tomorrow to decide. Return with us or remain exiled forever. But know this, if you stay, you are no longer Orc. You are nothing, no clan, no family, no heritage. Just a traitor who chose humans over her own people. I chose not to murder prisoners. If that makes me a traitor, then I'm okay with that." Ulya turned to leave, stopped at the door. "Your father would be ashamed." The words hit harder than any weapon could. Sheka's hand tightened around the red stone until it hurt. "My father," she said slowly, "taught me that honor meant doing the right thing even when it cost everything. So maybe he'd be proud, or maybe he'd be ashamed. I'll never know, but I can look at myself in a mirror. Can you?" Ulya didn't answer, just walked out. Her warriors followed, disciplined to the end. The tavern collectively exhaled. Mara appeared from wherever she'd been hiding. "Well, that was dramatically terrible." Sheka sat down hard, legs suddenly deciding they were done supporting her. "Yeah." Oswin came over, sat across from her. Didn't say anything, just present, solid, there. "You okay?" he asked after a while. "No, but I will be. You made the right choice." "Did I?" Sheka pulled out the red stone, looked at it, the gold veins catching lamplight. "I just gave up any chance of going home, ever. I'm permanently exiled now, cut off from my people, from everything I was. What if this is a mistake?" What if I'm trading my entire heritage for what? A job hauling barrels, a town that tolerates me as long as I'm useful. You're trading it for freedom, Oswin said, for the ability to choose who you want to be instead of having it dictated by someone else. That's easy for you to say. You're human. You've got an entire kingdom to fall back on if things go wrong here. Had, he corrected. Past tense. They kicked me out too, remember? I've got exactly as much to fall back on as you do, which is nothing, which is why we make it work here. Sheka looked at him, at the quiet certainty in his eyes, at the man who'd somehow become the most important person in her life without either of them planning it. When did you become wise? She asked. I'm not wise. I'm just old and tired and too stubborn to give up. He pushed his ale across the table. Drink. Tomorrow we'll deal with tomorrow. Tonight, we survive tonight. She drank. It tasted like cheap ale and bad decisions. It tasted like home. Tomorrow came anyway because tomorrow is rude like that. Ulya and her warriors were at the town gates at dawn, waiting, standing like statues in the morning mist. Sheka walked out to meet them. Not because she was having second thoughts, but because some conversations needed to happen face to face. Some endings needed to be acknowledged properly. Oswin followed, not close, just within sight, far enough to give privacy, close enough to intervene if things went sideways. You're staying, Ulya said. Not a question. I am. Then it's done. Ulya reached into her armor, pulled out something small and metallic. A clan token, Bloodstone clan insignia carved into iron. She held it up, then broke it in half with her bare hands. The sound was final, irrevocable. Sheka of no clan, you are formally exiled from Bloodstone. Your name will be removed from the lineage stones. Your deeds will be forgotten. Your existence will be erased from our history. She dropped the broken pieces at Sheka's feet. You are dead to us. The words should have hurt more, should have cut deeper, but Sheka found that they just were. Just words, just ritual, just the final closing of a door she'd already walked through months ago. I understand, chieftain. Do you? Ulya's voice was quieter now, almost sad. Do you understand what you're giving up? Not just clan, not just family, but identity, purpose, everything that makes you Orc. I'm still Orc. The green skin didn't fall off. The tusks are still here. Sheka touched her chest. But maybe being Orc doesn't mean what we thought it meant. Maybe it's not about blind obedience and endless war. Maybe it's about something bigger. There is nothing bigger than clan. There is. Sheka pulled out the red stone, held it up. There's choosing to be the person you can live with. There's finding family that chooses you back. There's... She glanced at Oswin, still waiting in the distance. There's finding people who see you as you are and stay anyway. Ulya followed her gaze, looked at Oswin, looked back at Sheka. A human, a friend. We don't have human friends. You don't, I do. Sheka smiled, small, sad. And maybe that's why I'm here and you're still fighting wars that never end. Ulya was silent for a long moment. Then, I hope he's worth it. What you're giving up. He is, but more than that, this is. Sheka gestured at Crosspoint behind her. Messy, chaotic, imperfect. This town, this life, this choice to be something other than what I was born to be. Goodbye, Sheka of no clan. Goodbye, chieftain. Ulya mounted her wolf, because of course she rode a wolf. She was that kind of leader. Her warriors did the same. They rode out without looking back, disciplined to the end. Sheka stood there holding a broken clan token and a red stone, watching her past disappear into the morning mist. Oswin walked over, stood beside her. You okay? Ask me again in a year. Fair. He bent down, picked up the broken pieces of the token, examined them. These are actually kind of nice. Shame to waste them. What are you going to do with broken pieces of my former identity? I don't know. Make them into something new, maybe. Sometimes the best things come from pieces that don't fit anymore. He pocketed them. Ready to go back? Yeah. Mara's probably got 17 more barrels for me to move. Sounds miserable. It is. But it's my miserable. That counts for something. They walked back to town, side by side, not touching, just together. Two exiles who'd found something like home in a place that had no reason to want them but let them stay anyway. 6 months later, the Crooked Mug had become something unexpected, a place where humans and orcs occasionally shared tables, where the rule was simple: cause no trouble, you could stay. Cause trouble, you left through either the door or the window, depending on how much trouble you'd caused. Mara had hired 2 more orcs, both exiles, both looking for the same thing Sheka had been looking for, a place that didn't care about their past. Crosspoint was slowly, reluctantly, becoming something different, not integrated, not perfect, but functional. The kind of functional that happens when people are too busy surviving to maintain hatred. Sheka still worked at the tavern, still lifted barrels and broke up fights, but she'd also started doing something else: teaching. Young Peter, the soldier from Captain Derek's patrol, had approached her 3 months ago with a question that changed things. "Can you teach me to fight like an orc?" She'd laughed, then realized he was serious. Now she had 4 students, 2 human, 2 orc, teaching them not just combat, but the old codes, the real ones. The ones about honor and choosing when to fight versus when to walk away. Oswin watched sometimes from his corner table, not interfering, just observing, being proud without saying it. One evening after training, Sheka joined him at the table. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the tavern do its tavern thing. "You ever regret it?" Oswin asked. "What you gave up?" "Every day," Sheka admitted. "But I don't regret what I gained." "Which is?" "Choice. Freedom, friends who don't care what species I am." She pulled out the red stone. It had become a habit, touching it when she needed to think. "My father gave me this, told me blood doesn't wash away. I thought he meant orc blood, clan blood, but maybe he meant something else." "What?" "Maybe he meant the blood that matters is the kind you shed together, the kind that comes from fighting side by side, from protecting people who can't protect themselves. From choosing to see someone else's humanity or orcity, even when the world says you shouldn't." Oswin smiled. "That's pretty philosophical for someone who spends most of her day lifting things." "I contain multitudes." "You keep saying that." "It keeps being true." Mara came over with food neither of them had ordered, but both would eat, because that's how Mara worked. She set down plates and looked at them both with the expression of someone who'd figured something out and was waiting for them to catch up. "You two are idiots," she said fondly. "We know," they replied in unison, "but you're my idiots." She walked away, already yelling at someone else about something else, because running a tavern was just professional chaos management. Sheka looked at Oswin. Really looked. At the person who'd shared food with a starving orc in the middle of nowhere, who'd waited at gates and paid fees and stood nearby when exiles happened, who'd somehow become the definition of home without either of them planning it. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For asking if you could share your fire with a hungry orc. For not killing me when you had every reason to. For," she gestured vaguely at everything, "for all of it." "You asked if you could eat with me," Oswin corrected. "I just said yes." "Same thing." "Not really. You had the courage to ask. I just had the decency not to be an asshole about it." He raised his mug to courage and decency, the bare minimum that somehow changes everything. They drank. Outside, Crosspoint continued existing. Loudly, chaotically, imperfectly. Inside, 2 people who shouldn't have been friends sat together and were. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's exactly enough. The world didn't change overnight. It never does. Change happens slowly, like water carving stone, like seeds becoming forests, like single choices compounding over time until suddenly the landscape looks different, and you can't quite remember when it started shifting. Crosspoint became known as the town where species didn't matter as much as whether you paid your tab. Other orcs started showing up, not many, but enough to prove it was possible. Humans started realizing that orcs made pretty good guards, pretty good workers, pretty good neighbors when you got past the initial "they look like they could rip me in half" thing. Captain Derek never fully approved, but he stopped actively disapproving. That counted as progress. Sheka's school grew. More students, more questions, more young people, both human and orc, learning that maybe the old hatreds didn't have to be their hatreds. That maybe they could choose something different. Oswin eventually stopped taking guard jobs, started helping Sheka teach. Turned out he was good at it. Patient, clear. Had a way of explaining complicated fighting techniques in simple terms that made sense. They never became more than friends. Some stories need romance. This one didn't. What they had was deeper than romance, more fundamental. The kind of bond that forms when two people save each other's lives in ways that have nothing to do with swords and everything to do with seeing each other as human, as orc, as people. Years passed. The red stone stayed in Sheka's pocket. She touched it less frequently now, needed it less, but kept it always, not as a reminder of what she'd lost, but as proof of what she'd found. One evening, decades after that first meal by a desert campfire, an old orc and an old human sat at a corner table in the crooked mug, grey in their hair now, scars that had stories. The kind of comfortable silence that comes from knowing someone so long that words become optional. A young orc walked in, thin, dusty, moving like someone who'd been walking for days through a desert. Looking around with the desperate hope of someone who was one bad break away from giving up entirely, she approached their table, swallowed hard, asked the question that would change everything. "Excuse me, can I eat with you?" Sheka looked at Oswin. Oswin looked at Sheka. They smiled. "Sit," Sheka said. "There's always room for one more, because that's how it works. How it's always worked. One person helping another, one meal shared, one moment of compassion that cascades forward through time until suddenly the world looks different and nobody can quite explain how it happened." The young orc sat. They fed her, gave her water, told her about Crosspoint, about opportunities, about the possibility of building something new from the broken pieces of something old. She listened like it was the most important conversation she'd ever have. It was, because in the end, the world doesn't change through grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It changes when a starving orc asks if she can eat with you, and you say yes. The bravest warriors aren't those who never feel fear. They're the ones who choose compassion despite it. Blood makes you orc. Loyalty makes you family. But choosing to see the person across the fire, really see them, that's what makes you brave. Sometimes the meal that saves your life isn't about the food. It's about someone looking at you like you're worth saving. And sometimes, just sometimes, one simple yes can change two worlds forever. If this story moved you, like it, subscribe to our Orc-Bound Tales channel and share your opinion in the comments. What would you do if a hungry orc invited you to share his campfire? Watch our other stories about impossible bonds and unlikely heroes. Remember, we are all travelers in search of a cozy campfire and someone willing to share it. See you in the next video.